Who's My Spider Baby? By wolfypuppypiles. Summary. Peter was used to being babied. With May as a parent, it was just part of the deal. But it wasn't great being treated like a kid while trying to be a superhero. Peter knew Tony didn't mean to do it, and sure, it was kind of nice sometimes, but it was also really, really embarrassing. Peter doesn't react well. Peter was used to being babied. With May as a parent, it was just part of the deal. But it wasn't great being treated like a kid while trying to be a superhero. Peter knew Tony didn't mean to do it, and sure, it was kind of nice sometimes, but it was also really, really embarrassing. Come on, Wonder Kid. Showing up late to a fight is just a lazy surrender. Peter tugged on his suit and tapped the chest, letting it adjust and tighten to his frame. Coming, Mr. Stark! It was Peter's first real mission with the Avengers, and he was beyond excited. Sure, he trained with them, and they had that whole fight against each other in the parking lot of an airport, but those didn't really count. No, this was an actual, newsworthy, superhero-level mission. According to Thor, there were a small group of radicalist aliens, hell-bent on embarrassing the Asgardian by taking the planet he'd promised to protect. Apparently, they thought that everyone on Earth was stupid and would be easy to conquer, so it was the Avengers' job to prove them wrong. And Peter was an Avenger now. He'd gone through training and actually earned all the upgrades in his suit, and he was ready. Sort of. Maybe. Okay, he was freaking out. Peter stood in front of his mirror and pulled his mask on as he blew out a big breath between his lips, blowing a raspberry. Okay, I can do this. I'm a hero. I'm an Avenger. I can do this. Yeah! Karen sounded pleased. Of course you are. You have been training for this. You'll do great, Peter. The teenager smiled and brushed his suit down. Thanks, Karen. Tony was waiting outside his door for him when he came out and slapped him on the shoulder. Okay, kiddo, you ready? Peter nodded and patted his suit. Yep, all geared up. Tony tilted his head as he let Peter out to where the others were waiting by the Quinjet. No, I mean like, emotionally and all that? Peter hesitated. Yeah, I think so. Steve stepped up behind him and took Peter's other shoulder, squeezing in encouragement. Good. We're pleased to have you on this mission with us, Spider-Man. We could use some extra help with these aliens. They can be tricky. Peter was about to reply when a boom popped the air around them as Thor landed on the platform from his flight, with his hammer used like a mini helicopter. Peter was never going to get used to that. His thunderous voice seemed to punch Peter in the ears. These Varrock creatures are prideful and arrogant. This child hero will be able to take them on easily. Tony rolled his eyes as he turned to Steve. Why is he always yelling? Peter pointed a little as he muttered. Child hero? That was uncalled for. Steve ignored both of them and waved everyone over to the war room. Let's go over the strategy before we go. I don't want a repeat of our last mission. Everyone turned to Hawkeye, who frowned and lifted his hands. What? I got Hydra and Hydro confused. How was I supposed to know it would grow 2 more heads? I thought it was a water type or something. Tony rolled his eyes as Peter covered the snicker, Hawkeye winking at him when he caught it. Everyone, listen up. I had Thor give me all the information he had on them and did a little analyzing, so we at least have the advantage of knowing their weaknesses. But first off, we need to settle on our defense strategy. Peter listened eagerly as Tony pointed to him and then to the hologram of the city he'd brought upon the touch table in front of them. Baby Genius will swing around the perimeter until we've got most of them sorted. I don't want you any closer to these things than you have to be. So, Wait until they're tired before you team up with someone to take them out. The teenager deflated a little, both at the nickname and the fact that he didn't get to fight without a babysitter. I thought I was getting to fight this time. Why am I back up? Steve took his shoulder again, which seemed to be his signature move, although Peter hardly minded because it felt so nice. You are fighting, but teaming up is the most strategically sound plan for this mission. It's got nothing to do with your fighting skills or how we think of you. Natasha shrugged, her arms folded. Of course, it's got nothing to do with the fact that Tony has suddenly become Dad of the Year for some kid he found on the internet. Tony frowned at her as Sam laughed. Shut up, Romanov. Underoos earned his place on the team, and that's why he's here. Steve's right, it's the best plan. So, Spidey, you will web up the aliens so the others could take them out. Peter could barely hear anything that was being said, amidst all the stupid nicknames being used in place of his name. Even Thor's rumble was swallowed up by Peter's embarrassment. These Varrock are fast. The young one should keep his distance. Fletchling will be fine. He's got fast reflexes. Baby Widow. Peter's hands started to shake and his breath came in faster, shallower pants with each name used, until he could no longer think straight. He didn't even stop to take in what was being said, only forcing out his words before bolting to his room. I can't do this! His legs flew as he made it to his room as fast as he could, locking his door and curling up into a ball behind it. Karen's voice was soft in his ears, but he couldn't concentrate on what was being said. Peter, your vitals are indicating you are having a panic attack. Are you okay? The teenager shook his head as he pressed his knees close to his chest. He could hear footsteps approaching the door, and he pulled his mask off before holding his hands over his ears, needing quiet. Words stumbled from his mouth as tears threatened to fall. No, I can't do this. I can't. A knock at the door made Peter flinch, and he pressed his hands tighter, scrunching his eyes closed as he tried to block out the voice coming from behind the thick metal. Petey? Come on, kid, open the door. Peter let out a sob as he began shaking his head. No! There was that word again. Kid. The voice sighed and spoke quietly to another voice as Peter felt tears slipping down his cheeks. It was too much, and he couldn't handle it all at once. If he could just get somewhere dark and quiet, he'd be fine. His voice was strained and wobbly as he called out for the AI wired into the whole compound. Friday, turn my lights off, please. Certainly, Peter. With the room dimmed and his hands over his ears, Peter could concentrate a little easier, but there were still people outside his door. But Peter's enhanced hearing picked up a few words anyway. Go fight those aliens, and I'll be there once I deal with this. Is he okay? I don't know, he's young, and he hasn't had to deal with aliens head-on before. It might be a bit too much. We could really use him out there. Tell him that for me. I will, if he lets me in. Peter shook his head, another sob falling from his mouth. No, go away, please. It was quiet for a moment, or as quiet as it can be when you have super hearing, and Peter listened to the footsteps slowly walking away from the door until there was only one shuffling pair of feet remaining. Peter knew that it would be Tony, but he didn't want to see Tony right then, because it was kind of his fault that Peter was so freaked out to begin with. He knew he didn't mean to, and that it was the billionaire's way of showing affection, but the nicknames did not help Peter to feel in control. Peter was still trying to suck in breaths that didn't hurt his chest when Tony sighed from the other side. Come on, kiddo. Just tell me what's wrong so I can help. Peter's voice came out as a whine, but he didn't have the brain space to care. No. Tony sounded more concerned this time, and Peter could hear the shuffle as the man crouched at the door in order to hear the teenager better. You sound like you're having trouble breathing. I'm getting worried. I don't want to have to override the lock and open it forcefully, but I will if you don't slow down your breathing. Peter leant against the door, pressing his forehead to it as he cried. He couldn't take any more stimulation while so stressed, but he wanted Tony with him too, because he was really scared. I can't. A small thump sounded on the door as Tony leant his head against the metal. He knew exactly what it felt like to have a panic attack or want to be alone, but he also knew that it wasn't safe for Peter to be left alone in such a state. Yes, you can. You're Spider-Man. You can do anything. Peter removed his hands from his ears, only to curl his fingers into his hair as he shook his head. No, I'm not. What do you mean? Tony kept talking as he leant up to the keypad on the door, tapping in a code to open it from the outside, because as much as he wanted to give the kid his privacy, the whistling, strained breathing was really worrying him. I'm not Spider-Man. You never call me Spider-Man. I can't do it. Tony froze, looking at the door where the voice was coming from, as if he could see through it. What are you talking about? Peter could breathe easier when he was talking, as if confessing the feelings and thoughts he'd shoved away was breaking the dam in his throat, making it easier to pull in air. You never call me Spider-Man, and you hardly ever call me by my name. You call me Spider-Baby, or Kid, or something else. And I am just a kid. I can't fight aliens. I can't be a hero or an avenger. You don't think I can do it. You think I'm too little. Tony closed his eyes as the guilt washed over him. He slumped down against the door, abandoning his task as he sighed. Peter, I am so sorry. I didn't know it made you feel that way. Peter let go of his hair and curled his arms around his knees, rocking slightly to try and focus. It was easier to breathe, but his tears wouldn't stop. I know I'm young, and I don't have as much experience as you guys, but I want to help. I thought I could help. You can. You don't think I can. You don't take me seriously. No one does. And you're right. I can't fight aliens or monsters. I can't do it. I'm just a 15-year-old who got bit by a spider. There were a series of beeps and then a click, and the door began to slide open. Peter simply sat up as it moved out of the way, but didn't uncurl from his ball until he felt hands on his arms. Come here. Tony's voice was small and soft, and Peter couldn't help but uncurl and fall into his waiting arms. Tony pulled him into his chest and held him tight, rubbing his hands over the teenager's back as he cried. Peter, I am so sorry that I made you feel like I don't trust you or believe in you. Of course I do. You're the smartest kid I know and a brilliant fighter. I know that you can handle yourself out there, and the only reason I hold you back is because I know how dangerous this all is. Aliens terrify me. Most battles terrify me and leave me with PTSD and nightmares and panic attacks at the mention of past fights. I don't want that for you. You're too good. Peter leant against him and lifted one hand to wipe at his wet cheeks. Really? Tony nodded, wiping a thumb over Peter's face, where he'd missed a drop. Really, I didn't know the names bothered you. They're just my stupid way of trying to, I don't know, bond, I guess. I'm not very good at affection. I never have been. Just ask Pepper. But I do care, and if it makes you this upset, then I won't use them anymore. Peter sniffled, finally calming down, and smiled a little as he leant his head against Tony's shoulder. You could still use some of them. I like Spider-Baby, and I guess Kid isn't so bad. Tony hugged him tighter, letting out a small breath of laughter. Okay, I can do that. Peter looked up at his hero, huge eyes making Tony smile even more. Thanks. And Mr. Stark? Yeah? You're pretty good at affection. Peter snuggled further into Tony's arms as he smiled, and Tony felt his heart warm. Thanks, Spider Baby. Steve threw his shield at another Varrock alien, catching it as it ricocheted back. We're here. You can start the party now. The first Avenger turned to see Tony flying in, with Spider-Man swinging behind him. Hey, you guys made it! Peter hopped from building to building, firing webs at aliens to tangle them up so the others could attack them without retaliation. Sorry we're late. Natasha fired her weapon at one creature, at the same time as snapping another one's neck with her feet. Before she spoke to the newest member, her voice strangely soft for someone so violent. Are you okay? Peter fired a web and nodded, sounding embarrassed but touched by her concern. He'd always liked Black Widow. Yeah, sorry I worried you. I'm okay now. Sam flew overhead, soaring right over Peter so that he could follow him to a group of aliens on the ground. Good, because we could really use those webs of yours. These things are really fast. Think you could tie them up for us? Tony watched Peter go to work with pride, which was evident in his voice through the comms. Of course he can. Spider-Man can do anything. I always forget Peter was freaking 14 when he joined. It's natural that Tony keeps treating him like a kid, but I do understand how frustrating and infantilizing it would be when that's all he calls Peter by. Lovely writing all around. Thank you so much, wolfypuppypiles, for giving me permission to podfic this. And thank you, dear listeners, for watching. Don't forget to send kudos to the author through the link in the description. Also, if you'd like to request any fics, make sure to click the tally link below. And if you'd like to show more support or check out the monthly schedule, click the link through Ko-fi. Hope you have a great week. Till next time.